PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Cuggy. Greetings from Malahide, County Dublin, and I've got highlights from round 5 of the Sinquefield Cup. Now, this was such an interesting, such an exciting round that I'm going to show you highlights from 3 games. Count them, 3 games from this round. First of all, let's get straight into the chess. You might recall this position if you saw my previous video. So this is the round 4 game between Wesley So and Nepo. Okay, this endgame. So quick recap of what happened. So basically, this is a really important move from Wesley, cramping Black's kingside pawns. And the king was able at some moment to transfer. Well, first of all, Black's pawns were cramped on the king side. The king was able to transfer, and this d-pawn was just too strong. The Black king couldn't cross over, and Black never got counterplay on the king side. Very important that these pawns basically cramp these 3 pawns here. Black simply couldn't get counterplay, and great technique from Wesley, and Nepo was outplayed, and that was a very fine final move. Rook c5, building the bridge with d5. Now, why am I showing you this game from round 4 again? Well, look at this game, Nepo's game from round 5. Where did they end up? What position did they end up in? Incredibly, this endgame, this time Nepo with white. It's 3-3 on the king side with this 1 extra pawn here. So this is Nepo against Ding from round 5. Well, what an extraordinary coincidence. Now, this position is a little bit different, however, to the endgame in round 4. Because Ding has managed to get this pawn to f5. So Nepo has been unable to cramp Black's pawns on the king side with g4, for example. And that also allows the king out to a much better square. So Black has gained space on the king side, and that rook protects the king. Now the king is trying to transfer over, but you see, in this game, Ding has been able to advance his kingside pawns, and that's going to give him counterplay on the king side. So g4, that's basically Nepo is trying to get his king in, but in this case, these pawns are too far advanced, so that's always going to give Black counterplay. And this time, if Black is able to take a pawn, that's instant counterplay. So this is how the game went. Here's a crucial moment. So Nepo decides to put his king back to f3, and once that happens, well, it's clear that Ding has enough here to save the game. Crucial move was f3. That's similar to how Wesley played in the previous round. In this case, Black has just enough counterplay. So takes a pawn. Now what about that d-pawn? Looks dangerous. In this case, the king is able to cut across and stop that d-pawn advancing. And it's not really going to help if the king advances, because rook takes pawn and the rook is able to defend from there. So it's still quite close, but it does make a big difference that the king is able to cross and that Black has counterplay with these pawns. And yeah, in the game after king f3, really Ding wasn't in trouble from this moment. He always had counterplay, and well, in a few moves later, the game was drawn. Okay, so that was that one. So Nepo's been learning a lot about this endgame in the past couple of days. Okay, now I want to move over to the game between Alireza Firouzja and Anish Giri. Now I'm going to go right up to an endgame. So this position, now Giri was under pressure from quite early on in this game. You can see he's a pawn down. You can see that Firouzja has very good pieces here, and that's an extra pawn. But it's still not so easy. Giri exchanged queens, and he does have a very active rook. This e-pawn is attacked. I think this is a very interesting moment. I have to say Giri was running short of time, and we know how strong Alireza Firouzja is in, well, he's a brilliant blitz and rapid player, basically. Very interesting moment from a practical point of view. Firouzja played for the initiative. He played rook b7. Typical, absolutely typical. And, in a sense, a very practical human way of playing. You want to grab the initiative. The computer prefers f3 just to protect that pawn. But it's not a very human move because White is exposed along the second rank. And I can understand that Firouzja just wasn't comfortable with that one. White is better here, but you've just got to be careful. But, Black's pieces are quite active, but it is a sound extra pawn. That's the way the computer wants to play. But it's not very human because the king isn't great. And that's why Firouzja, I think very understandably, went for the initiative with rook b7. And notice his king is still nicely protected with that pawn on f2. Knight takes e4. Attacks the bishop, which dropped back to e3. And now Giri defended his f-pawn with king g6. Again, a very human way of playing. You want to keep your king safe. In fact, after rook takes pawn, rook takes f7. I mean, this looks very dangerous for Black now that White has broken through on the 7th rank. In fact, after this, Black is safe enough. I mean, this is a tricky position for Black to play because, White has chances to attack here, and White's king is safe with the pawn on f2. The computer says Black is all right here, but when you're short of time, very hard to appreciate that. So Giri plays the human move, king g6, but now Alireza hits him with some tactics. So first of all, a check and knight takes c6. Okay, that takes the pawn on c6, all very understandable. Bishop d2 from Giri. So he's hoping to break through to White's king by eliminating this bishop. But now come the tactics. Rook takes pawn check. If king takes, then a knight fork, and of course that's winning for White. So Giri played king e6, rook e7 check, and after king d6, a beautiful move, rook d7, and that completely discombobulates Giri. Of course, if king takes knight, then rook takes rook. And in the game, this happened, so that knight fork again. And knight takes, and now, well, Alireza is 3 pawns up in this endgame. And this didn't present too many difficulties. Still got to be careful here, actually. That knight is potentially tricky with the king far away. But actually, Alireza's technique was perfect. Just watch what happened, actually. It was very nice. He calculated and understood that actually he could just throw his pawns forward like this and didn't even need to bother with that knight. This is how the game finished. Didn't even need the king actually to get those pawns through. And then a5. And here, Giri resigned because one of those pawns is going through. The knight cannot prevent one of those pawns from rolling through. So in May 2024, Alireza Firouzja had dipped to number 16 in the world in classical chess. I mean, there's no doubting his credentials in Blitz and Rapid. He's winning tournaments all the time online, and recently has had success in the Sinquefield Cup, Blitz and Rapid. But in classical chess, well, he's pushing through. In this tournament, he's coming back, and if we look at the standings in this Sinquefield Cup, then he is now in the lead with 3.5 points. Wesley So has 3. Yes, I'm giving the game away. Let me look at one more game, and this was a fantastic encounter. So Praggnanandhaa, Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa against Wesley So. I was very interested in this game. By the way, it lasted 107 moves. I'm not going to show you all 107 moves, have no fear. I'm very interested in the opening and the early middle game because it follows the lines of, well, a theme and an opening that I've discussed quite a lot on this channel, namely the gioco piano, and this early development of the bishop to g5, which I think is a very attractive plan for white. It's a very provocative move. You're provoking black into playing with g5, which looks great fun for black, but actually creates real weaknesses around black's kingside. And if you recall, Carlsen played some fantastic games using this strategy. You might recall that he bounced this knight around here in order to get that knight on this wonderful e3 square, looking at the crucial d5 and f5 squares. Anyway, castles here instead of that. And indeed, Carlsen has played this exact position previously against Dominguez in an online game, and he simply played the traditional strategy. Remember, because g5 has been played, then the f5 square has been weakened. That's where we want to bring the knight. Carlsen simply played rook e1 and knight f1, and this, I already like white's position here, but it's very complicated. But interestingly, Pragg played in a different way here. He has played this exact position previously as well, actually, and he played a3. So this is a real global strategy. He's intending perhaps to play b4 and gain some space on the queen side. Knight h7 from Wesley. King h1. Okay, it's all very delicate. Pragg has played in this way before. h5 and h4. So why did Pragg play the king to h1? Well, if black plays g4, knight h2, and then the king has stepped out of the way of the bishop, out of the diagonal, and then white can play f3 to open up the king side. And remember, there's that beautiful bishop on c4, and white can crack open the king side. So after h4, I mean, this is getting really sharp. Wesley played bishop g4, so bringing another piece in and pinning. And Pragg took on g5. Now, if knight takes g5, then bishop h4. It's another reason for playing the king to h1. There's no nasty kind of discovered here. Discovered check. And this pin is deadly. So Wesley couldn't recapture on g5, so he swung the knight round to e7. Now queen e1 steps out of the pin. Knight g6, so that knight is covering these squares. That's important. and d4. So Pragg steps forward in the middle, blocking out this bishop, but also threatening to capture here on e5. And if knight takes g5, knight h4, and that is already really very, very strong for white. So again, if knight takes, then bishop takes, and that pin is so unpleasant. And white is ready just to blast open the king side. I mean, maybe, just f3 and queen g3, potentially f4 as well. And if this isn't taken, well, that's already a threat. And in any case, f3 or potentially f4. I mean, this is already just dreadful for black. So Wesley played rook e8 to guard that e-pawn. Then queen e3. So Pragg is hanging on to that pawn on g5. I mean, to my eyes, already this looks very good for white. I mean, Pragg is a pawn up. Black's king side looks shaky. That bishop is wonderful on c4. Knight h2. So that's getting ready to advance the good old f pawn. If knight takes g5, f4 takes... I mean, this reminds me of a King's Gambit type position, where you crack open the f file and you just barrel down on the f7 pawn with this strong center. I mean, this is just dream position for white. Let's go back. So knight h2. So this is where Wesley got creative. Pretty creative already. h4. I mean, white has a number of ways to play this position. Pragg selects a continuation, which is very clean. He plays knight takes g4. I mean, it looks pretty good. Here he could have played f takes g3 and rook f5. Now that pawn, that double pawn, is actually really useful, covering these squares, preventing that knight from entering the game. Okay, there's a check on h8. I mean, this looks a little bit scary because white obviously must keep that diagonal closed. But in fact, white is doing pretty well here, so that pawn can be covered. I mean, I can understand why Pragg didn't go for this. It's a little bit problematic considering this diagonal needs to be kept closed. Instead, he selected a much cleaner way to play, actually, with knight f3. King g1, okay, so there's potentially counterplay here. I mean, it's such a crazy position. Wesley exchanged on d4 and knight e5. Knight takes, pawn takes, knight takes. I mean, Wesley doesn't want to take here to open up the f file. That looks tremendous. Knight takes g5 and queen takes g3. So, as I said, it's a very clean way that Pragg has played. And what's the score? He's 2 pawns up at the moment. Looks tremendous. This is a threat to play knight takes f7, exploiting the pin. Wesley played rook f8. I mean, at this point, I thought, well, Pragg is just going to win this game without any problems at all. But what I found impressive was how Wesley somehow managed to create just a little bit of place. And now black is looking to attack on the h file. Knight takes, pawn takes, rook h8 still at a very annoying threat. So Pragg played pragmatically, and I think correctly. He just exchanged queens. So, you know, there isn't going to be any difficulty here with the king side, because, you know, there's going to be a nasty check on d7. Black simply doesn't have time to play rook here because of rook d7, and the king doesn't have a good square to go to. King g6, bishop f7, king f8. You can just exchange rooks, for example. But And yet, I mean, this looks lost for black. But Wesley kept things going. G4. So wanting to cramp white's kingside pawns and get to the king a little bit. Rook d7. G3 stops the g-pawn from advancing. But still, white is 2 pawns up here. But Wesley kept going. There's a little bit of pressure here. Now, the Pragg wriggled and wriggled. I mean, by this stage, Pragg was running short of time. And basically, at this moment, I've leapt forward to move 51. He was playing on the increment. I watched this live, and I was so impressed by both players. Wesley finding incredible ways to keep just a little bit of something in the position to make it difficult for white. Pragg finding ingenious ways to create winning chances. So if Pragg could exchange all the rooks here, then this would be a win with the 2 extra pawns. But getting past, this problem, well, again, I can't take you through all 107 moves. Pragg missed a couple of chances to win, and finally the game ended in the draw. But he was basically in time pressure for the next 50 moves. I'm serious. He was playing on the 30-second increment. Incredibly difficult endgame. Brilliantly played by both players, I have to say. But finally, Pragg rushed his pawns forward, but there was enough counterplay. The king had ended up this side, but the game finally ended in a draw. And that was the final position. It was a brilliant game. I was watching it live till the early hours, just for you, just so I could report back. Saturday is a free day in the Sinquefield Cup. I'll be reporting back for after that, but I will be posting another video, another Kalashnikov game actually, sent in by a viewer, which is absolutely superb. So watch out for that. Anyway, remember, my chessball courses are on sale at the moment till the end of August. Time's running out. I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching.